Let's try that again. There we go. Hello and welcome to the Gerry Joe Soccer Show. I'm here with Mike Nevin, and this is the first episode of the past, present, and future series that we're going to be doing. And Mike is a Liverpool fan, and so he's going to be talking through his favourite past Liverpool player, his favourite Liverpool player in the present, and one that he thinks could be there in the future and could prove to be a good player. So welcome to the show, Mike. And if you just start off, then just tell us. I think I can tell by your accent, but if you can tell us how you started supporting Liverpool and how long you've been a fan for.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a local. I'm from Liverpool, born in Liverpool, and one of the funny things about me is that I've got a bit of a reputation as a glory hunter because my first ever Liverpool game was when I was 6, and it was the 1974 FA Cup final, where they beat Newcastle 3-0. Kevin Keegan scored twice, obviously a very famous name, and Steve Highway. So that was, was a hell of an introduction to football, going to Wembley for the first time. And I suppose that experience that we all have our first game when you're hit by that incredible green pitch, whichever game it is, even at non-league level. I think the first time is something you never ever forget. So to do that at Wembley, I was lucky enough to get tickets with my dad when I was a 6-year-old little boy. So that was it really. And then I started going in sort of around 79, 80. So it was like a 5 or 6 year gap really between me becoming a fairly regular supporter. But even then I was only sort of, 10, 11, 12. And then I've had a season ticket initially in the Kop. Then I moved to the stand at the side, which is the Kenny Dalglish stand these days. So and I've been a season ticket holder ever since 1982. So it's a way of life really, and of late I've sort of turned it into my career because I've sort of moved away from being a salesman, a con man basically, into writing about football. So currently I'm actually writing a book about Liverpool's season in 81-82, which probably a lot of your viewers wouldn't go back that far, but it's fascinating in the sense it's the only real season in that sort of period of Shankly and Paisley when Liverpool revolutionised their team over one season. And, sort of famous names now, but came in as teenagers. Ian Rush, Ronnie Whelan, Bruce Grobbelaar came in to replace Ray Clements. Craig Johnston came in, Mark Lawrenson. So it was for the first time, it was sort of revolution over evolution, the traditional Liverpool way, if you like. But there were teething problems that season because obviously they brought in so many new players and a lot of the old guard had been moved on. Dalglish was getting a little bit older. He's still a great player, but not quite the force that he'd been in the 70s. And they ended up 12th at Christmas and they were way off the pace. And then they changed captaincy mid-season. Bob Paisley took the captaincy off Phil Thompson, who was a local boy and really sort of struggling with the pressure of the responsibility, and gave it to Graham Souness. Now they didn't like each other really. They never really saw eye to eye to begin with. And then when Thompson lost the captaincy as a local lad to quite a well-spoken Edinburgh fella in Graham Souness, then that caused a lot of sort of rancor in the dressing room. But it sort of, I think it created two feisty camps in the group, and it created the right spark. And they effectively then sort of won almost every single game until the end of the season and ended up champions, and that was their 13th league title. So I'm writing a book about that season at the moment, but it's not just a football book though, because it sort of commentates on the social unrest that there was in Liverpool at the time. A very poor city, being very hard hit by the government, a lot of unemployment, and as a teenager growing up, it was quite a frightening time to think that you could go to uni, get a degree, and still maybe come out without a job. So I'm trying to bring out the sort of political and social backdrop of what it was like to grow up in Liverpool in those really sort of harsh times of recession in the early 80s.
I have to say, the writing a book is it's definitely on my bucket list. It's one of them things I've always wanted to do. So, best of luck with that. Definitely, it's something, as I say, I've always wanted to do.
I think anyone's got a book in them. And it's a lot easier when you're dealing with fact rather than fiction because you don't have to make it up, and you can follow a narrative. I actually wrote one about the Liverpool season in the mid '80s when Dalglish took over as a player manager at the age of 35, and we won the double that season. I actually published that with my co-author, like called Gerry Shaw, and we self-published that one, and it did really, really well. And that, but we did that sort of 10 years ago, and it's been my ambition really to do another one. And thankfully, I've got a publisher for this one. It's a company called Pitch Publishing, who they're quite a revered publisher, do some fantastic football publications and sports publications. So lucky enough for them to have asked me to do this. So you get the financial backing, and sort of the images and stuff like that is all sort of looked after for you, which makes it a bit easier, and it'll just look nicer as well. So it's been 10 years in the making really since the first one.
Yeah, Pitch Publishing. I think I've read a few other books. So one of the ones that jumps out at me that I read a couple of years ago now, but it was Liverpool one, was John Toshak. It was a very interesting book because as a character, kind of like, obviously it kind of felt like that there was so much to his career, like, because he went so far. Like, he obviously had the great times at Liverpool, then at Swansea, then he went to Spain, and I think I don't know if he still is, but I think he was the only man to have won the 3 major cups in Spain with 3 different teams.
I didn't know that. I mean, Toshak was one of my like early Liverpool heroes, really, in that sort of late 70s team. Big lanky player, but really good footballer as well. I suppose, I mean, for younger listeners, you might liken him to a little bit to Peter Crouch, but he wasn't quite as awkward as Crouch, if you know what I mean. He was very gangly and tall, but just had a real sort of natural athleticism to him. And famously, himself and Kevin Keegan formed an almost telepathic partnership, which was very much the centre of Liverpool's success under Bill Shankly, and then latterly Bob Paisley. So yeah, I've got good memories of Tosh, and I remember, and actually in my book, Bill Shankly dies mid-season. He's retired as Liverpool manager 7 years by then, but he dies, and Swansea were the first team to come to Anfield after Shankly's death, and Toshak famously came out as Swansea manager. They lined up for a minute silence. It was actually the first minute silence that Anfield had ever staged. I mean, they're 10 a penny these days at football matches. I mean, they have minute silences for anything, sort of, or pretty much anything, anything related to football is a minute silence. But they're very uncommon in those days. And he basically had, underneath his Swansea tracksuit, he revealed like a blood red Liverpool shirt to say, this is where I made my reputation. This is the guy that gave me my fame and fortune, really, in Bill Shankly. So it was a lovely mark of respect. And then, as you say, then he moved to Spain, and I think he became quite successful in broadcasting as well, because he was obviously a very, very respected voice on Spanish TV. Obviously became bilingual, and I think that one of those footballers really that you can sort of attach a real sort of emotional intelligence to, a clever man, but someone who was obviously a deep thinker and well suited to broadcasting as well as management.
So what we'll do then, what I'm thinking is, because there's kind of like a lesser pool to pick from, I'm thinking we'll start kind of and go backwards. So the player for the future, I have to say now, I obviously know what your picks are. Out of them all, I would say this is the one that I would say was probably the most straightforward of your picks, and the most obvious one. But if you can give me your process, was it always going to be this guy, or did you have to think of another couple? Was there another couple that were close?
Not really, no. So I'm going to talk about Harvey Elliott, who's on Liverpool's books. He's currently on loan at Blackburn Rovers and is basically ripping things up. Tony Mowbray there has been talking, in glowing terms about him. It's no surprise to me. I think the thing with the other young Liverpool players, I mean, for example, Trent Alexander-Arnold, I mean, he's not one for the future because he's one for the present, albeit that he's still young. And, Liverpool have had a young side sort of maturing over the last 3 years. But, and there's a crop of good young players at Anfield through the academies and, sort of under 18s and under 21s. But this guy, he's already made his debut last season. I think he got a league winners medal at the end of the season because he played enough games. And whenever I've seen him, I mean, he's everything I love about football. He's like myself, left foot, loads of guile, pace, drops the shoulder, goes past people. And I was disappointed. I understood why he went out to Blackburn because, it's still a relatively high standard and it gets you used to the physicality of the English game at a young age. But I was frustrated really that they didn't keep hold of him, and I think it's actually come back to bite us because, of late Liverpool have struggled to score goals. They've lacked a little bit of their usual creativity, and the front three have been the front three as we were talking about earlier before we came on air. Mane, Salah, and Firmino have been overplayed really because they've never had the chance to be rested because they've had a relatively small pool. And it was only Diogo Jota coming in to sort of ease the burden on the three of them. And of course, he got injured. So the impact up front is beginning to be felt now, I think, as Liverpool have had this quite significant dip that's pretty much put them out the title race. And I think if Harvey had stayed, I think he'd have been given his opportunity. I mean, might have been off the bench, but I'm sure he would have started games as well, certainly in the FA Cup. And then, there'd have been opportunities maybe in the Champions League with them having, such a big bench. And I think that just that pace, that guile, that creativity, he's a little bit different to the front three. I mean, Mane's very, very direct, very powerful, loads of speed. Salah's, Salah. I mean, you can't pigeonhole Salah as a footballer at all because he's that good. Firmino is a little bit of a workhorse, but an intelligent player. But none of them have got quite the same. I don't think any of them are quite as talented as Harvey Elliott. He's just incredible. And I think I was just thinking before about things to talk about when you asked me about him, and I think he's got. I mean, it's sacrilege really for a Liverpool fan to say this, but a lot of Ryan Giggs about him as a youngster before Giggs became more of a rounded player. He was all pace and sort of ability down the flanks, but also very good coming inside and being central. And he reminds me a lot of Ryan Giggs, I think. And again, very, very heavily left-footed, but he's got a decent dig on his right as well. So, as I say, I think, a bit disappointed he didn't stick around, bit disappointed that Liverpool weren't just a little bit more adventurous in thinking, do you know what, we'll keep hold of this lad because it might come to pass that we need him. But even if there hadn't been the injuries that they've had this season, I think there's potential for him to have come in anyway. Because as with Michael Owen and Robbie Fowler, and obviously Wayne Rooney at Everton, to name another one, really, I think when you're that good, 16, 17, you're old enough because there's no substitution for quality, and this guy is quality. So I'm looking forward to seeing him back. I hope. I'm sure Liverpool have got a sort of a bomb-proof clause to take him back with no sort of sanctions whatsoever, and he'll come back and he'll have a great career. But we definitely could have done with him this season. But so anyone who hasn't seen him already, watch out for him. If you get the chance to see a bit of Blackburn in the Football League, then watch out for him. And then sort of latterly next year, I think he could certainly be a real impact breakthrough player for Liverpool.
I was having a wee look then at like how he's been doing at Blackburn. So he started 21 games, come off the bench once, scored 4 goals and set up 8, and he's still not even 18. So he's playing at a good level in the Championship.
Yeah. I think
those are good numbers.
I think he debuted for Liverpool at 16. I think the first time I saw him, it was in a pre-season friendly up at Murrayfield, actually, funnily enough, a rugby ground. And we were playing Napoli. We got absolutely battered that day. It was one of those typical pre-season. Liverpool went at races. Napoli won 3-0. And he came on last 20 minutes or so and made a real impact in it. When you've watched football as long as I have, you do, I mean, without wishing to sound too big-headed, you have an eye for a player because you see so many of them go by the wayside. And, you become almost like a scout. And the way that you actually watch football slightly differs because you have almost like a quasi-professional view of things, in terms of like thinking, managers should make a change now. This isn't going particularly well. Left side's looking a bit dodgy. So-and-so's getting targeted here. What would I do as a fan? And it's not that you understand football any more than anyone else, but when you're at the matches, I'm sure you can appreciate you get a different perspective than you do on TV because you can see the whole thing, the whole spectrum. As I say, I mean, just first impressions, and I've seen nothing really to change my mind since that day that I seen him first up in Scotland.
I think actually, whenever, as I say, I was researching and whenever I think it says that he actually signed for Liverpool that day and made his debut that day. I think it was like July. I think it was July 28th, 2019, maybe something around then. I can't remember exactly, but.
that'll be
around that.
right. So a friend of mine I grew up with and actually went to games with in the season I'm writing about, 81, 82. He'd moved up to Scotland, so it was a good opportunity to go up and visit him. Mark, his name is Mark McColgan, and we went to the game together. And as I say, it was notable really for Liverpool losing, but that was the thing. That was my standout thing really. And as I say, ever since then he's done nothing to change my mind. I think he'd be. I mean, he could be one of the greats. I've nailed the colours to the mast there now, haven't
I? He certainly, from what I haven't seen as much as you have, but he definitely looks the part. Yeah. So we'll move into the present then, and again, this is one where I think there's definitely so to speak, like sexier choices that you could have went with, but personally, I think this guy who you have picked is massively underrated. And certainly underrated in his role and what he's done over the last couple of years for Liverpool. So if you want to tell me why you picked this guy, you want to tell us who it is?
It's Roberto Firmino. So he's obviously one of the famed Liverpool front three. It's funny, isn't it? That it's a really basic term, but that thing, the Liverpool front three, has become. It's almost like cliched now. The three of them playing there together. I think Firmino is, as you say, he's underrated because he's the most unobvious of them. Because as I say, Salah, very special player, unbelievable talent. Spectacular goals with his left foot. Can do anything with a football really, but also works very hard. Mane, all pace, power. Sort of a real traditional spearhead, if you like, in many ways. Was Firmino he's not particularly quick. But he's got this ability when he's on form and he's rested and he's not. At the moment, I think Liverpool's problems really centre around the fact that he's not being quite the same player, and a lot of his ability to glide across the pitch, and that's how I describe it. He doesn't seem to be running fast, but he covers the ground very, very easily, and he takes up incredible positions. And he's often been the player over these last 3 years, whilst we've been successful getting to Champions League finals, winning the Champions League, winning the Premier League. He's the glue really of that front three, and he's also a bit of a conduit really with the midfield as well, because he come deep for the ball, he can turn, and he's just got. I don't know. He's like a pure footballer in many ways. I'm just a little bit worried that he might be just slightly past his best, because he when we signed him, I think he was in his mid-20s. Brendan Rodgers signed him from Hoffenheim, and we didn't really see the best of him straight away. He got a really bad back injury. One of the things that annoys me about Liverpool fans is they forget things, really key things. And under Rodgers, he hardly played. There was one famous game where Rodgers played him sort of like right midfield against Manchester United, and it didn't work out particularly well. And we lost 3-1. It was a game when Benteke scored an incredible overhead kick, people might remember, and Anthony Martial scored a clincher towards them for United. Which, just as an aside, when you're a Liverpool fan and Manchester United score against you at Old Trafford, it's the worst noise you'll ever hear. It's awful. And the first time I went to Old Trafford was back in '82. Frank Stapleton got the winner for United about 9 minutes from time, and it was like a bomb had gone off. And every time you go back to Old Trafford and they win, which they normally do, it just takes you back. But that day, so for me, he didn't have a particularly good game. Wasn't particularly influential, was played out of position, but he missed an absolute sitter, proper bona fide open goal, where he blazed it over from about a yard, and there was no keeper. It was worse than that famous miss by Ronnie Rosenthal, which keeps getting brought up on the show reels. And that could have been a start to his Liverpool career there under Rodgers. Rodgers might have ended up staying. It was one of those ones really. You get these sliding doors moments in football. But of course, obviously under Klopp, he sort of really developed into the player that we've come to know. And I think, I've got a very sort of special place in my heart for him, because growing up, again, same season as I'm writing about, Liverpool played for the first time in the World Club Championship in 1981 against Flamengo of Brazil, and we got absolutely battered 3-0. Zico was playing for them for Flamengo, this famous Brazilian in the World Cup, and they tore Liverpool to pieces. Liverpool weren't particularly interested. I think they went for the money basically, because it was obviously sponsored, and in those days, actual gate receipts and the commercial stuff were important, because there wasn't the same TV money in those days, and gates were low as well. So they went for a bit of a jolly, but nonetheless got battered by Flamengo. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night to watch that game as a sort of a 11, 12-year-old boy, and listening to it on the radio. And it was one of those things where, you got the thing under the covers, and it's like one of those magical things. We lost 3-0. I never got over it. And then, of course, what goes around comes around. We end up in Qatar last year for the World Club Championship final. Who are we playing? Flamengo. And a really good Flamengo side. They were talking about them as probably the best South American team, club side, in terms of the personnel that they had in the last 15 or 20 years, and they were good. And we beat them in extra time, and Roberto Firmino got the winner. So he'll always have a special place in my heart for that, because it sort of corrected a wrong from my childhood, if you know what I mean. And one thing I always joke about is the fact that his name is Roberto Firmino, but he's being adopted as Bobby, which just makes it. I mean, it's not for me that I like to keep me Latins Latin. I like the glamour of him being a Brazilian footballer, and he's Roberto Firmino to me. So the Bobby thing, I mean, Bobby's the type of name you give to a fellow who works in Fords, or Bobby Charlton, or a Bobby on the beat. So it's not for me that. But joking aside, yeah, I mean, and he's been fantastic for Liverpool. And as I say, I think he'll have a second coming. I think he needs a break. And I think football is, at the moment, in the vacuum that it's being played in, it is a little bit false in some senses. And I think he's one of those players, I think, that comes alive when there's a crowd. And he's got a very special song at Anfield as well. The cop, sort of will belt that out. And you see his shoulders raise, and he arches his back, stands up straight. And you see the impact of a fan base and their support for the player very much with him. And I don't know whether that's affected it, or whether it's just basic tiredness. He's just been blunted a little bit, but I'm sure we'll see him back to his best soon. And I'm glad you agree with me that you think he's underrated, because he definitely is.
Yeah, I think especially Liverpool are one of these teams. I always find that whenever the football fans, you'll have football fans that go to the matches, and a lot of them will tend to be, like, almost like I don't want to say that people are daft, but like there's like an intelligent bunch that go to matches and see things in the grounds and in the stadiums, and then you've got absolute morons that are given a voice in social media, and you're like, my God, do not let these people talk. Like, and Firmino is one of them people where, like, basically if you are not scoring 30 goals a season and you're a striker, you're rubbish. It's like why did he not score? Why? It's like, it's so simplistic. And I think that what he brings to the team, like I don't think Jurgen Klopp would, probably, if you're talking the most important players in the team, Firmino right up there, and he would be one that Jurgen Klopp wouldn't want to replace. Just while we're on sort of the present and obviously the future, I personally think that Liverpool have a big sort of. I think this season's probably gone, but I think this summer is a big time for Liverpool, because I know a Liverpool and a Leeds fan probably don't want to talk about Man United, but whenever they were at their best, they always tended to be going out and providing competition for the key places. And you've mentioned it, and I seen Jamie Carragher's bit on Sky the other night, and he was talking about like how much percentage the key players at Liverpool have played over the last couple of years. The game that Liverpool play is high intensity, so you're going to have basically going to be shortening your career a bit anyway by what you're doing. It's previously been said, 3-year periods for managers, and obviously Klopp's been there. Like, you've had the UEFA Cup final, lost the Champions League final, won a Champions League, and had basically 2 years in the Premier League of just winning every game. So I think personally that this summer is a big one for Liverpool, where they need to make the right investments. It's not a case of going out and revamping the team. The team's very good. The team's really good, and I think Klopp's a brilliant manager. But I just think it just needs just a wee injection, just because at Dortmund, whenever Klopp was at Dortmund, he kind of had them couple of years. He won 2 league titles, got to the Champions League final the next year, and Bayern ended up winning everything. And it'll be interesting to see. I think Liverpool just kind of need to make sure that this season is a one-off, and to be fair, it's a very unique set of circumstances this season, so you can write it off. But then I think next season's the one where we'll really see, are Liverpool going to go on and have 5, 6, up to 10 years like kind of dominance, and it's a big summer. So like, what would you like to see Liverpool do in the summer?
Yeah, it's interesting that you sort of see it that way, Gerry, because I am inclined to agree with you. I don't think radical change. I mean, obviously, up until a couple of weeks ago, they were still in contention for the title. Even a fortnight ago, they were winning 3-1 at Spurs and looking fantastic. And so not radical change, but as I say, there might be an issue about Firmino, because he's played a lot of football. I mean, that was partially solved because Diogo Jota came in and we were able to begin to rotate. And it's not just about Firmino getting rested, it's about Salah and Mane being able to be rested as well across. If you're going to be playing 3 up front, if you've got 4 players who can play, then naturally you can carousel them if you like. So I think there's probably more of an issue about Firmino, but as you say, Liverpool are actually in a battle for the Champions League places now as well, and that traditionally that's always been something that affects players, sort of desires and intentions in terms of moving on. Now, as much as Liverpool fans adore Sadio Mane and adore Mohamed Salah, if Liverpool aren't in the Champions League, then they might think, well, I want to be playing Champions League football when the fans are back next year. Real Madrid are in for me, Barcelona are in for me. So I think there's any number of different challenges, really, in terms of sort of deciding which players they want to keep and the players that they can keep if they don't qualify for the Champions League. I don't think that's terribly imminent, and I hope that they've got a little bit more loyalty than that. But as Rafa Benitez always said, football is a lie, and it is. So I think that there is a little bit of uncertainty about where that front three goes, and then in midfield, stalwart for Liverpool the last 3 seasons has been Gini Wijnaldum. Now it looks like he'll be going to Barcelona at the end of the season, probably on a free transfer. Curtis Jones has come in and done very well. I did think about maybe going for Curtis as a player for the future, but he's almost like first team regular already. So I think there's a natural successor there. But at the same time, he's a young boy, and it would be unfair of him to be left to do it all on his own. I think there's room for Liverpool to get a midfielder in. I think Harvey Elliott will come back from Blackburn and will play a part. And then defensively, I suppose, obviously Van Dijk will be back, and Joe Gomez as well, who's still a young player. And, they are 2 absolute nailed-on first picks at centre-half under normal circumstances. Joel Matip is made of paper, and has been all throughout. He's had a bit of research actually over the last couple of seasons and done very, very well. But he's not reliable in terms of fitness. So I think he might be on his way. And it's a fullback. I think again, Trent has probably played a little bit too much football. So there might be scope for Liverpool to maybe look at a right-sided player as well, to maybe just ease the burden on him. They brought a Greek lad in to give Andy Robertson some sort of game time off this season, but that's not really happened. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his names. Greek pronunciations is all Greek to me. I'm not so bad on other languages, but not Greek. So yeah, I think there is scope for change, and I think the other issue with Liverpool is that the ownership have been fantastic. They've been very steady. They have invested money, but if you actually look at the bare facts, the money that was spent on Alisson Becker, and that is me seeing in moments. There's always one. Who's the other one? And Van Dijk, yeah. The big investments there really were funded by the sale of Phil Coutinho. So they haven't spent. Net spend is often quite a misleading thing. So Liverpool's net spend is low, albeit that they've bought quality players to address the positions that were holding them back, and the great signings, Becker and Van Dijk. But the ethos of the club is not to overspend, and Jurgen Klopp is a very pure manager. He will not sign players who he thinks are overvalued, and he won't sign anyone unless he thinks they can improve his sort of first 11, if you like, or his first 13 or 14. So that purity actually restricts your options. And if players aren't available at certain times, January window typically, he won't buy them. He just won't. He won't do it. It's been slightly different in this window because we had such a scarcity at centre half. We've had to bring in lad from Turkey plus Ben Davies from Preston. So I think again, Liverpool they're gonna have to slightly move the goalposts in terms of their approach. They might have to spend a little bit bigger, but then, like all clubs and like all businesses, they've suffered economically very badly through the COVID situation. Now, it's a question of whether you think, well, we've got to a point in English football now where we're back on our perch, if you like. We've been European, league, and world champions. I mean, what more do you want? But do we really have to be conservative at this point? And as you say, the sort of the shadow of Manchester United, who can always come back into the equation because they've got that spending power, they're that big. Plus, you've got Manchester City, who are becoming big. I mean, obviously, I'm always a big club, City, but not the behemoth that Liverpool are, that United have always been. But they're becoming a big club because they've got the facilities, there's the investments, their name is growing around Europe and obviously within English football. So it could be it's a big three-way fight, I think, at the moment. I mean, then you've got Arsenal always knocking around, Spurs, dare I say, even Everton looking better under Carlo Ancelotti. So there's a lot of competition at the top, and I think unless you go out and sort of basically get your balls out and sort of you invest and you realise that as pure a manager as Jurgen Klopp is, managers will always tell you, I'm as good a manager as the quality of my players are. And sometimes you've got to pay for quality. And I think Liverpool are probably in that situation where they do have to probably plug a few holes, yeah.
I think it's interesting what you say about getting finding the right players and the right thing. It's largely like with Liverpool, like you look at the front three and like they're probably all, if not in the top like couple in the world in their positions. Yeah. And it's like I've seen like teams before, like Barcelona, whenever they had Luis Suarez up front, obviously another ex-Liverpool player, but like whenever they had Luis Suarez for years and years, they were trying to find a backup. But it's like every big game, Luis Suarez is going to start. So who wants to be that backup? And then you're going probably down into like a lesser quality. Like so, like it ended up like they were signing guys like that, like Braithwaite that was at Middlesbrough a few years ago. Kevin Prince Boateng, and they were signing guys like that. So it's hard. It's hard. I think your guy Diego Jota, he certainly come in and he made an impact, but sort of as the way Liverpool's season just seems to have gone this year, gets an injury.
His impact. I mean, you say they made an impact. He's incredible. He's absolutely incredible. And obviously, I think when you're a Liverpool fan, because you've seen so many great players down the year, you're obsessed with your own team and you're obsessed with the players who are in your side to say, are they as good as Dalglish? Are they as good as Souness? Are they as good as Hansen? And then, even like somebody will come on to when I talk about a past player, by comparison, is this winger here as good as Steve McManaman? Is how does he compare to John Barnes? How does he compare to even go back to my dad's era of sort of Ian St John, Roger Hunt, Peter Thompson, even Billy Liddell in the 50s when Liverpool in the 90s. There's always someone that you've got to be held up against in terms of comparison. So signing for Liverpool is a big thing, and I think where Liverpool actually failed really before Klopp came in is they weren't selling themselves as this storied club, because it was sort of all we had left was our heritage, but we weren't attracting players good enough to come and play for us, because I don't think the club was being sold well enough. As basically you come to Liverpool and you make a success of your career, you are a god forever, and that will earn you more money, because it will come down to money, and an agent needs convincing, and that agent needs to be told, listen mate, you might be taking 10% of this lad's money over the next 3 years, but if he comes to Liverpool and makes a success of things, he's going to be a rich man for the rest of his life. He's going to be on the after dinner set until he's 80. It's that type of goldfish bowl type club, like Celtic. I know you do a bit with Celtic. Leeds, in a certain sense, as well as a real name from the past, a massive name in English football. Barcelona is another one of your conversational topics, and so these are the things that make football clubs. And it's not really about trophies. It's about sort of fame and fortune and the glory game, as to coin a sort of 60s phrase around Spurs and other great clubs. So I think it was relevant a few years ago. I don't think we sold ourselves well enough to get the players in that we needed. And I think part of, just going back to your point really, is attracting someone to come and play for Liverpool. You say, listen, mate, if you can play 30 games for Liverpool across this season and you fill in and you play all the cup ties and you're on the bench in Champions League games, you're going to get a Champions League winners medal here. Now, is that better than playing 50 games for Southampton, for example? Of course it is. So you've got to sell it as a bit of a project where you're part of a group. You might not play every week, but Jota has come in and being exactly that. He wouldn't play every game, but when he's come in, he's proved to be as good as the others. And I think, again, that, talk about Van Dijk, Liverpool haven't actually conceded that many goals. It's not a question of conceding goals. I haven't said that. Man City made a mockery of that at the weekend. It's not been that. It's been the fact that we haven't scored enough and we haven't been as free flowing as we've been. So, losing Jota was a big thing, but he's a good example of getting someone a little bit under the radar. Yeah, he has a nice reputation at Wolves, but no one knew he was as good as he proved, and just very unfortunate that he got that injury.
So, the unenviable task, I would say. You've mentioned you've been following supporting Liverpool since the 70s. So I would imagine that your short list is a long list of who you could have picked. So who is the star of the past?
Yeah, it was impossible. I came down on this fella because I thought, a lot of your listeners might be in their 20s and 30s, and I'm in my 50s now. So for my sins, and so I thought I'd try and bring it as up to date as I could for a famous name from the past. But with honourable mention and apology to Kenny Dalglish, Kevin Keegan, John Soshak, as you said, John Barnes. John Barnes probably the best player I've ever seen, seriously. But I'm not going to talk about him because everyone's heard it. There's a lot of talk about John Barnes, and he's not only a nice man who actually became a friend of mine last year, but just a fabulous footballer. He was like the English Maradona. You couldn't knock him over. Unbelievable. But I'm not going to talk about him. And Suarez, unbelievable player. Fernando Torres, unbelievable player. I mean, we've been so lucky with strikers, but so I'm going to go for Robbie Fowler because not only was he an unbelievable footballer, and I'll talk a bit more about how good I think he was in a minute, but very much, the type of fella that you can identify, a local lad, no real sort of sides or attitude to him. You can imagine Robbie Fowler as a 9-year-old little boy with his kit bag and his boots and buying chips on the way home and getting the bus home. And he didn't really change.
And his Everton top, but he'd been wearing an Everton top when he was...
Well, I think he did. Yeah. The funny thing about Rob is that he likes to be called Rob as well, which I think is fascinating because everyone knows him as Robbie Fowler, but he answers to Rob. And so his dad's name, his middle name is Bernard, which is my dad's name. So I think it's like Robert Bernard George Fowler or something like that. So he's got a really funny name. And his name's Fowler, and he was dirty at times. He would foul you, and obviously a little bit controversial. I mean, one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen in professional football was when Everton fans, obviously not liking Fowler, looked like a boyhood blue, bit of a turncoat, ends up playing for Liverpool, ends up eight in Everton. Always scoring, and then so this thing goes around the city that he had a drugs problem. An absolute load of nonsense. No one with a drugs problem goes and does 90 minutes against Man U at Old Trafford or anyone else. It just doesn't work like that. And then so he imitated snorting a line of an illicit substance against Everton when he scored a penalty. And Gerard Houllier, God rest his soul, recently departed, then justified it by saying that it was something he'd learned from Rigobert Song, an African player from Cameroon, who taught him this thing about eating grass back in Cameroon. It was the most ridiculous. Actually, everyone knew exactly what he was doing, and it was a way of Robbie just getting back at these Evertonians who planted these scurrilous rumours around the city, which ultimately can be quite damaging because the famous thing is no smoke without fire. And people think, well, maybe he has had a bit of an issue, or maybe he's a weekend offender or something like that, But but it's just in terms of his ability. I mean, left foot, unbelievable. I mean, I think one of the things about Fowler now, you look back and reputationally, he sort of remembers as a bit of a poacher. And, good at scoring the clumsy goals in off the knee, that sort of thing. Not a bit of it. I mean, he scored some unbelievable goals, left foot, 25, 30 yards, free kick specialist. One time, I mean, he made Peter Schmeichel look like a clown one time at Anfield and at Old Trafford in the same season, 95, 96. He literally put Schmeichel on his backside a couple of times just through feinting, just like dropping a shoulder, bang, in the back of the net. See you later. So, yeah, and brilliant in the air as well. He was about 5'8", but he had this ability to sort of time his jump and get above massive defenders and then nod them in. Powerful headers as well. I talked about Peter Crouch before. He was good in the air, Crouchy, but he had no sort of power in his neck. Whereas Robbie was thick, obviously a lot thicker set. I think another thing you liked about him is when he struggled with his weight a little bit as well. So it made him a bit more normal. And if he went out and had a pint and a bag of chips, it'd be on his hips by the Monday. So you'd have to work doubly hard to get it off. And, and then there was a time, and this again, this thing about Liverpool fans forgetting, and he's got this iconic images of being God as his nickname. His first season at Liverpool, he started brilliantly. Everyone loved him. After 6 months, was the dip in form. The cop was on his back that much because they'd seen how good he was. And then 5 or 6 games, he goes without a goal. It doesn't look like he's trying. I think he put a little bit of weight on because he's still a bit of a kid and a bit of puppy fat, basically. And the crowd started carping at him. And then I distinctly remember, so he got these 4 or 5 games without a goal. He hit one in against Man City on Boxing Day from about 35 yards, top corner, cop end. And he ran to the cop, not a smile on his face. It was basically like that, see you later. Like, shut up, get off me back. And it was that kind of attitude, plus the idea, and then the thing about the quite famous Dockers dispute as well in the 90s, where, Dockers were out on pickets and effectively fighting for the families' futures in terms of their jobs. And Robbie scores a goal in the European game, lifts his shirt up, and he's got a T-shirt. It was a bit of a play on words with Calvin Klein, but it was support the Dockers. So he was, a fantastic common man. And but yeah, footballing wise, old fellas used to say, do you know what? I watched a documentary the other week on Jimmy Greaves on Amazon Prime, which I would recommend to anyone who is listening to this. It's brilliant. I think she's called Greavesy. It's fantastic. And older guys, when Fowler was coming through in Liverpool, were saying he's the closest thing we've ever seen to Jimmy Greaves. And Jimmy Greaves' record in English football it's better than I thought when I seen this programme the other week. And it's phenomenal. 300 odd league goals for West Ham, Chelsea, all of London. Obviously missed out on the World Cup, which ultimately sort of ruined his life. But Fowler and Greaves like peas in a pod, and Fowler was that good. But I've got a brilliant story about Robbie Fowler. So a few years ago, I got invited to do an interview. It was at Liverpool doing a kit launch, and I was sat at a table. And you were given one past player and one present player. So I had Simon Mignolet on my table. So I was allowed to ask him a question. He's sitting there in this brand new purple goalie top. I mean, he just looked ridiculous. He's trying to take him seriously. Nice fella, giving you a good answer at everything to your question. Like Simon, how does the goalie top feel? What's the padding like on the elbows? And he's coming. He's being all Belgian with you, and he's like, "Oh, very nice, very nice." Extra padding for. So we do it like really mundane. And Robbie's there, and Robbie was just sitting there eating crisps off the table, a bit of hospitality, crisp after crisp after crisp. Then he said, "But I stop eating these, otherwise I'll spoil my appetite for me Chinese tonight because he loves Chinese food." And I looked at him and thought, this lad is not in the mood for a footy question now. He's been here all day. And I said, Rob, I'm going to ask you something different. So when I got the vibe that he wasn't in the mood for any boring questions, I texted a few of my mates to say, can you think of something funny to ask Robbie Fowler? And one of my mates, Martin, who I've done podcasts with, the Anfield Rap, which he texted me, he said, ask Rob, you're standing on a tennis court on the service line, right? And you've got to throw an animal over the net, right? Without some. So basically, the jeopardy is you've got to get it over the net, and it's got to land in the service box. said, what's the biggest animal that you can guarantee you'll be able to lash just like that and get it over the net? And he honestly, he'd give it so much thought. It was ridiculous. It really mattered to him. If I'd have asked him, oh, remember that goal in the cup final? He'd have been like, no, not interested. And Andrew, he goes, yeah. It's probably called some kind of dog. And I said, what? I said, it's a dog, yeah. Could be an Alsatian, a Husky, bloody St. Bernard, or... He said, well, nah, not that strong, am I? He said, maybe a small Chihuahua. And I was laughing. He's stronger than that. He goes, no, I've got it. He said, you know, penguins, not that big, are they? And I said, yeah, they're about that big, aren't they? He said, you could get one by the wing. He said, I'd lash it. I'd get that over the net. But he loved the question. So I said to him, can I have your number? Because I wouldn't mind doing an article on you at some point in the future, give you a ring sometime. And he was just about to say yeah, basically. But then his PA girl comes in, this like dead sort of attractive girl, you know, so business suit and everything, very efficient. Says, well, all inquiries for Mr. Fowler will come via myself. He winked at me, and I went to the toilet. He followed me down the corridor, walking down towards the gents, and he went, "Hey, oh, Mike, here's my number." He said, "She's great, and she really looks after me, but you know, there's my number anytime you like." And that was the type of fella he was. You know, he still is really, but a great player, great fella, and that's why I went for him.
Just to make it clear, then no penguins were harmed in
in this broadcast.
Was
he played, and he ended up going to Leeds as well, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He went to Leeds. I think Leeds. I was actually going to ask you about that. Sort of the story seemed to be that at the start of that season, he had a bit of a training ground bust up with Phil Thompson, and then he has said himself that Houllier forced him out of the club. And obviously, I know like there's been a lot of great like sort of obituaries and stuff come out of Liverpool, like with Houllier passing away recently. And I was just going to ask, like, what kind of like what is the reaction there with Liverpool fans? Like, would they say it was Hollier's fault that Fowler left, or
I think
was it just the partner of the ways?
I mean, Robbie actually came out and sort of was very nice about Houllier, which is, you know, 100% what he's like. You know, he is a nice fella. I adored Gerard Houllier as a Liverpool manager, because it was him really that put us back on the map. You know, he got us winning a European trophy again in Dortmund, in the UEFA Cup, and the treble season. But we didn't win the league. But he got us back in the Champions League. We won 5 trophies in 2 seasons. And yeah, I adored Houllier. He had 2 terrible years after his heart problem. And very sad that he died, because he looked really well. He was on this fantastic documentary called Liverpool, the 30-Year Wait, which the BBC brought out after we won the league in the summer. Unbelievable programme for anyone who wants to watch it, because it charts our history really over 40 years basically, and it's bang on the money. But and Houlier's on that, and they re-showed it when Houllier died, just as a mark of respect for Houllier. Great manager. But I think the problem there was the fact that Houllier had heard so much about Robbie Fowler before he came to be the Liverpool manager, sole manager. But Robbie was never fit under Houllier, and I think it was a source of incredible frustration to Gerard Houllier that he didn't get the benefit of a fit Robbie Fowler, and that was like an end conversation between the two of them. When are you going to be fit? Shankly was the same. Shankly used to ignore players if they were injured, or say just shoot them. You know, really, really brutal old style sort of mentality. And I think Rob not being fit then obviously was something that, but then he did get fit, and in the treble season he played a big part. He scored in the UEFA Cup final. So I don't think they disliked each other. But what you got to remember about footballers is, and I've sort of got to know a few of them over the years, is that football, when they go to training, they say I'm going to work. And if you're in a workplace and your boss is favouring someone else over you, there's always going to be a little bit of acrimony. And Michael Owen was coming through, and Robbie Fowler, from being the demigod, the hero of the cop, was just getting his nose pushed out of the joint a little bit. And then, you know, added to some fitness issues, didn't see eye to eye with Phil Thompson. I know Phil Thompson, lovely fella, couldn't wish to meet a nicer person, but a bit of a sergeant major really in terms of the way that he conducted himself around training. he was perfect for Houllier. Really, he was like a third eye for Houllier, and obviously being a local fella, him and Fowler. I mean, those Scousers, like we get on pretty well, but we're always arguing. You know, it's like part of our DNA. If we're not having a row, we're not happy. So, you know, I think there was a lot of that going on, and ultimately, you know, love Gerard Houllier, love Robbie Fowler, and the funny, maybe I'll finish off on this, that him leaving to go to Leeds, I think it was probably the right decision for Liverpool at the time, because he got good money for him. He was 12 million, which in those days was a real bonanza, that, to be honest, because he was finished as a player, in the most traditional sense. But then he ended up going to I think he was at City for a while, and he ended up coming back, and we got a second coming from Robbie Fowler. Now, I think he was 31 when we re-signed him, but the buzz that we all got when he re-signed, and you forget the fact that he's not the player that he was. But when he made his debut back at Anfield, and he didn't even have his famous number 9 shirt on, he actually wore 11, and that was his number in his second spell. He scored about 7 goals, and that season when he come back, and he did pretty well. And he was unlucky, actually. We played Chelsea in the 2007 Champions League semi-final, and Dirk Kuyt got the winning penalty, which was the 4th pen, because Chelsea missed all this. But Robbie was lined up to take the 5th one. And I think if he'd scored, he might have ended up playing in the Champions League final against Milan, which we eventually lost. So, again, another one of them little sliding doors moments. And he didn't quite get the sort of second coming, in the sense that he wasn't the same player. But it was lovely for him to come home, so to speak. And I think he said a few times himself that was the happiest day of his life. You know, he's a bit of a spent force, but Liverpool are re-signing me. I'm going home. And, you know, there's a Liverpool sentiment if you ever want to listen to it. You know, I'm going home.
So Robbie Fowler, some of his stats saying just 171 goals in his first spell, and then another 12 in his second, in all competitions. So 183 goals for Liverpool. He won 2 League Cups and FA Cup.
In how many games though, Gerry? It wasn't many games.
In total, so he's 183 goals in 369 games.
Yeah. So I mean,
1 and 2, which is
1 and 2. And bearing in mind, probably the last 5 years of his career, he wasn't fit. Yeah. And I think the first, so 94, 95, 95, 96, 97, 96, 97, he scored 30 goals, three seasons on the bounce, over 30 goals. That's how good he was. Then he did his ankle. He actually went up for a challenge in a Merseyside derby, came back, turned his ankle, and he was never the same player. And he was still a great player, but, you know, and Michael Owen to a degree was the same. He did his hamstring, funnily enough, at Ellen Road. I remember he went down, Owen, as though he'd been shot. You know, it was one of those hamstrings where they pull up, like, you know, as though they've been, you know, sort of sniped. And he had to change his game. And I think it happens to all of them. You know, they have these 3-4 years where they're at their absolute peak. And, you know, I think when you as the years progress, you tend to remember them as that player when they're really, really at the height of their professional sort of ability and talent, where their talent really is allowed to shine because they're in the best physical shape of their lives. And 94 to 97, Robbie Fowler, unbelievable.
I think you mentioned the 3 goals of the 3 seasons of 30 goals. I think he was possibly the first player to do that. His first 3 seasons in the Premier League. I was reading that earlier. But Robbie Fowler. So Robbie Fowler is the Liverpool star of the past. Roberto Firmino, the star of the present, and all eyes on Harvey Elliott to see what he can do over the next few years.
He's the new Robbie Fowler.
The new Robbie Fowler. Don't be saying that to him.
I think he's better, so you better watch out.
No pressure. No pressure.
That's been, Gerry. It's been really enjoyable. I think it's a really good, the good concept you got there. So I look forward to listening to what other guys on other teams are going to say about their favourite 3 or chosen 3. Because it's hard. Ask a United fan. name one from the past. I mean, how many have they got? Leeds. Christ, I'd be fighting over Alan Clark. Lee Chapman, different. Yeah, he's a Leeds player, a great Leeds player. Eric Cantona, they are. How's that for a bit of controversy?
I think Eric Cantona. The one thing I would say about for Leeds, and I actually do have someone lined up. I'm going to be doing this on Monday night with a Leeds fan, so you'll not have long to wait to hear the three. But Eric Cantona, everybody's always like he won the league for Leeds in 1992, but like. See, whenever you look at how many games he played, he really didn't play that much. And the man that you said, Lee Chapman, far bigger role, and even Rod Wallace too. But Cantona, yeah, that was a bit of that was a mistake on Howard Wilkinson's part, wasn't it? Like letting him go to United.
Such an unfortunate mistake, isn't it? And I said to you before about Liverpool not selling themselves properly at times. I think Liverpool had the chance to have a look at Cantona, and I think we were in those days we were still in that. The Liverpool way thing, and the Liverpool way is almost like a footnote to conservatism, and sometimes you can't formulate your entire future on everything you've done in the past. I think it's great to fall back on it and banner in this European Cup. Let me get this right. Forget not the past, for in the future it may help you grow. Which I think is really important. History it ultimately shapes the future, and you learn your lessons. But I think Liverpool probably over relied on that as a sentiment in terms of like, oh, it's the Liverpool way. We do things like this. Football and life is such an evolving thing. You've got to adapt. You've got to change. You just bend a little bit. Have your principles by all means, but you've got to bend, be a bit more flexible. And I think, as I say. Sometimes, they should have kept hold of Cantona. Liverpool should have bought Cantona. Billy Ferguson got him, and look what happened. 30 years of bloody pain.
Well, it's a sour note to end on, isn't it? but no.
The best after having a really good hour.
So, as I say, thanks very much to you, Mike, for coming on things like this here, shows like this here. They're only as good as their guests, and I have to say you've been brilliant. With a lot of stuff, a lot of knowledge, and it's been thoroughly entertaining. And I know I've enjoyed it, so hopefully everybody else will. Yeah. And as I say, we'll get the wee link shared now on the social media. And again, just thanks very much for coming on and giving me your time. Yeah. I know that I told you about half an hour.
Like the sort of history based as well on your channel. So if you ever want me to contribute to history, as a man of the past, I'm eminently qualified to talk about stuff that happened in the old days, because, as a mate of my dad said, all I've got to look forward to is the past.
But yeah, I would say definitely there's every chance you'll be taken up on that. But like I say, thanks very much for giving up your time this evening, and hopefully everyone's enjoyed it, and certainly three very interesting picks and good conversation. So thanks for watching, and thanks to Mike again for joining me. Thank you.
Cheers, boys.